A little rat, a little weasel, a little hard man in groups. I've met many of them through my years.
But beneath all the chaos, insults, and showmanship, Conor was digging far deeper than anyone realized. He began touching on extremely sensitive, even dangerous subjects about Khabib's personal life. It was obvious Conor had done his research. He knew exactly where to strike to cause the most pain and expose the deepest vulnerabilities. Some even claim he had access to inside information, possibly through his connections with fighters from Chechnya, or even people within Khabib's own circle. Whatever the source, Conor wasn't afraid to air it all out in front of the world. The wildest part? Some of Conor's warnings actually came true. And if Khabib's had paid attention back then, he might have avoided much of the chaos that later unraveled around him. So let's take a closer look. What exactly did Conor warn Khabib about? The warnings Khabib refused to listen to? Khabib and the Chechen dictator. The first explosive topic Conor brought up was Ramzan Kadyrov, the powerful leader of Chechnya, and his controversial ties to the Nurmagomedov family.
Chechen people know what I'm talking about when I call this man a coward, when I call this father a quivering coward.
Which Chechen?
Him and Kadyrov were at a mosque together, and he posts a picture of Kadyrov on his Instagram site. Kadyrov is the Chechen dictator, a crazy man, don't get me wrong. But Khabib's father, lick arse, oh fucking Houlihan, posts a picture of Kadyrov at this mosque, and Khabib's father posted a picture up, and the caption is, "Together we are stronger." It's such fake respect out of fear. The Chechens know, the Chechen people know that if the tables were turned and there was an opportunity for his father to stab that man in the back, he would do it in a heartbeat to take over.
Conor didn't hold back. He flat out called Kadyrov a dictator and a terrible human being. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. Over the years, more and more disturbing stories have come out about Kadyrov cruelty and unpredictable behavior. Reports claim that early in his rise to power, Kadyrov had one of his own associates, Magomed Israel, fed to his tigers after the man allegedly tried to overthrow him. And that wasn't the only mysterious or brutal death linked to him. In 2003, one of Kadyrov's wives, Janeta Mukoyeva, was shot dead in broad daylight. Years later, his son Adam's former coach and bodyguard were both found dead, reportedly because they failed to control Adam's growing drug problem. Yet, none of these cases were ever properly investigated. In Chechnya, people close to Kadyrov often die under mysterious circumstances, and no one dares to ask questions. Kadyrov's private militia, which later participated in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, has also been accused of horrific war crimes in Bucha, where hundreds of civilians were executed, women assaulted, and homes looted. Witnesses claimed they could identify Kadyrov's men by their unique camouflage, long beards, and traditional Chechen attire. For years, Khabib and his father, Abdulmanap, maintained a friendly relationship with Kadyrov. Abdulmanap even accepted a brand new car as a gift from him, and Khabib was often seen appearing publicly alongside the Chechen leader. At many public events, Khabib could be seen smiling, chatting, and taking pictures with Kadyrov. But as Conor once suggested, it's very possible the Nurmagomedovs maintained that relationship out of fear, not loyalty. In that world, refusing Kadyrov isn't an option. Even other Dagestani and Chechen fighters have been photographed with him, knowing full well the consequences of saying no. Even UFC star Khamzat Chimaev often looks visibly tense in Kadyrov's presence, constantly trying to please him during their training sessions. Everyone in that region understands exactly what Kadyrov is capable of when someone dares to defy him. In that sense, Conor may have been right. Khabib likely stayed close out of fear, not friendship. But Conor also made another bold prediction: that one day the Nurmagomedovs would betray Kadyrov. Ironically, the opposite happened. After Khabib won the UFC title, he became a global icon. Powerful, respected, and independent. He no longer needed Kadyrov's patronage and began to slowly distance himself from the Chechen leader. Apparently, Kadyrov didn't take that lightly. During an Instagram livestream in 2021, he lashed out at Khabib, calling him a UFC project and claiming his entire career was manufactured, that the UFC handpicked easy opponents for him and even fixed certain fights. In the end, it wasn't Khabib who turned on Kadyrov, it was Kadyrov who turned on Khabib. And through it all, Khabib chose to stay silent. Another explosive subject Conor brought up was Khabib's relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and whether Khabib's fame had crossed the line into dangerous political territory.
Are you disrespecting your President Vladimir Putin?
No, why not?
Are you disrespecting your President Vladimir Putin?
No.
Then what do you mean by that?
I don't want to take picture with
What do you mean by that then? Explain what do you mean. Are you disrespecting
Okay, I'm
your
gonna
president?
explain. Sit, I'm gonna explain.
In 2018, during the FIFA World Cup in Russia, Vladimir Putin briefly met Conor McGregor. The two chatted for a few minutes and posed for photos, something Conor proudly bragged about afterward. Khabib, however, had never met Putin, at least not until after he defeated Conor. Soon after that historic fight, Khabib and his father were invited to meet the Russian president in person. Putin congratulated him, praised his performance, and even hinted at supporting his future career. But that meeting turned out to be just the beginning of a much deeper and more complicated relationship. Years later, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Kremlin announced a partial mobilization, drafting men across the country to join the war. Dagestan was hit especially hard. Locals claimed that even men with no military experience were taken, despite promises to only recruit trained soldiers. The crackdown sparked mass protests, led mostly by women trying desperately to protect their sons and husbands from being sent to the front lines. Amid the unrest, Russian officials reportedly reached out to Dagestan's biggest celebrity, Khabib Nurmagomedov, hoping his influence could calm the population. According to Russian media, top Kremlin figures, including Anton Vaino and Sergei Kiriyenko, personally contacted Khabib and asked him to publicly support the war effort. But Khabib refused. That decision marked the beginning of a serious rift between Khabib and the Russian government. And things only got worse the following year. On October 29, 2023, chaos erupted at Makhachkala Airport when a violent mob stormed the terminal after rumors spread that a flight from Israel was arriving. Amid growing anger over Israel's strikes on Gaza, hundreds of young men broke in, chanting anti-Semitic slogans and searching for Jewish passengers. Police officers and airport staff were injured, and property was destroyed, though thankfully no Israeli citizens were harmed. There were no Israeli passengers on board that flight, but the damage had already been done. Ramzan Kadyrov quickly condemned the riots, calling them a plot to destabilize the region and urging the authorities to take extreme action. He said, "If someone joins an unauthorized protest, arrest them. Fire 3 warning shots. If they still don't stop, the 4th one goes to the head." Meanwhile, Khabib took a very different stance. He reposted a message from European wrestling champion Nurmagomedov, who pleaded with the authorities not to destroy the lives of the young protesters. Khabib added his own caption, "Allah is forgiving and loves those who forgive." That post directly contradicted the Kremlin's hardline response. Soon after, Russia's investigative committee launched criminal cases against more than 100 people, charging them with mass riots, a crime punishable by up to 15 years in prison. Vladimir Putin personally oversaw the investigation, a sign of just how seriously Moscow viewed the unrest. This marked yet another clear moment of conflict between Khabib and the Russian state. But then came the real punishment. In 2024, Russian authorities froze Khabib's bank accounts and assets, claiming he owed 306 million rubles in unpaid taxes from his foreign income. Not long after, special police units raided the Nurmagomedov's famous training gym, allegedly because a suspected terrorist linked to attacks in Dagestan had once trained there. The facility was soon shut down. All of this made one thing very clear: tensions were escalating fast between Khabib and the Russian government, and perhaps even between Khabib and Putin himself. He was forced to settle his debts and rebuild his business empire from the ground up. For months, Khabib stayed abroad, reluctant to return home. And once again, it seemed Conor McGregor's warning had come true. His prediction about Khabib's dangerous political ties turned out to be eerily prophetic. At one point, Conor even mentioned another shadowy figure behind Khabib's success: the mysterious billionaire Zayavudin Magomedov.
Why you took money from Magomedov? Hold on, you took money. You took money from Magomedov, and you were a little lick-ass rat.
No,
now
I
what?
took-
Putin locked him up.
took-
Say something to Putin about locking Magomedov up.
About
Say
what?
something.
About what?
Ask him to
I don't
release him
understand your
again.
English.
Ask him to release him.
I want to
now
understand
you
your-
don't
No,
understand.
what are you talking-
You're a lying bastard. When money got pumped into your camp by that little scumbag that's now in a little
No,
April
I
10
want-
cell.
you have
No
question.
money left.
And once again, Conor's words proved to be true. Zayavudin Magomedov was a Russian billionaire and the founder of the Suma Group, a massive conglomerate with major investments in logistics, construction, energy, port operations, and IT. His empire was largely built through his close ties with former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, who granted him access to nearly every corner of the Russian economy. By 2017, Forbes ranked Magomedov among the top 100 richest people in Russia. He was more than just a businessman, he was one of Khabib's biggest backers. He covered Khabib's fight camps, surgeries, and medical expenses, and even founded Eagles MMA in Moscow, where Khabib served as president and his father, Abdulmanap, was the head coach. Khabib once admitted that over half of his income came directly from that gym. But everything changed in March 2018, when Magomedov was arrested and charged with running a criminal organization, embezzling over 11 billion rubles, and defrauding the government through inflated contracts. Many believed his downfall came after he lost favor with the Kremlin, and unlike Medvedev, Putin had no interest in protecting him. Khabib repeatedly spoke out in Magomedov's defense, even before his fight with Conor McGregor. He publicly said, "My brother Zayavudin Magomedov is going through a tough time. I truly hope that our national leader, Vladimir Putin, will help him." Years later, Khabib continued to defend him, insisting that the punishment was far too severe. Another sign of how deeply connected he was to one of Russia's most controversial power players. But somehow, Conor already knew all of this, that Khabib would stay loyal to Magomedov, and that it was Putin himself who had orchestrated the billionaire's downfall. Whoever was feeding Conor information clearly had a deep understanding of how Russian power and politics really worked. What Conor didn't predict, however, was what came next. After Magomedov's arrest, Khabib found a new billionaire ally, Igor Altushkin, the owner of the Russian copper company, valued at around $3 billion, and a known associate of Putin. Altushkin quickly became one of Khabib's main backers. After 2019, Khabib was frequently seen at Altushkin's events, especially those promoting his MMA organization, the Russian Cage Fighting Championship, RCFC. Khabib even attended the grand opening of a new martial arts academy funded by Altushkin. Interestingly, Altushkin also sponsors another top UFC fighter, Petr Yan. So in a sense, Conor was both right and wrong. He was right that Khabib would remain loyal to Magomedov, but he couldn't have predicted how skillfully Khabib would adapt, finding new allies, new patrons, and building fresh political and financial connections. Over time, especially after the McGregor fight, Khabib's influence and wealth grew to such heights that he no longer needed anyone's protection. Still, the accuracy of Conor's information was uncanny, even down to his prediction that Magomedov would never walk free again. And here's the most fascinating twist of all. Some of Khabib's own prophecies would later come true as well. Some of Khabib's own words would also turn out to be prophetic. The tension between him and Conor actually began long before their legendary fight, and it all started with Conor's close friend and training partner, Artem Lobov. A while earlier, Lobov had publicly insulted Khabib, calling him a coward and accusing him of pulling out of fights over minor injuries. Then, during UFC 223 fight week in New York, Khabib ran into Lobov at a hotel, confronted him, and slapped him. An incident that famously triggered Conor's infamous bus attack later that week. At the time, Khabib said that Lobov was not a good person, and that he had bad values. Years later, that statement would prove true. Lobov ended up suing Conor McGregor in Ireland, claiming McGregor owed him between $5 and $7.5 million for allegedly coming up with the idea for Proper No. 12 whiskey, saying he found the distilleries and pitched the entire concept. But the court ruled against Lobov, stating there was no legal agreement and that verbal promises meant nothing in a business that large. In the end, Khabib's prediction came true. Artem Lobov did betray Conor. Final thoughts in the end. Both fighters turned out to be strangely prophetic. They knew each other's weaknesses better than anyone else, almost as if they could see the future. This entire story reminds us of something deeper. Sometimes our greatest rivals understand us more than we understand ourselves. They can see our fears, our limits, and our blind spots. And sometimes, their words turn into prophecy, because maybe our enemies aren't just the ones we're meant to fight, but the ones we should have listened to.